As she arrives at her sister's wedding, Woman is stopped by security, and when her sister shows up, she says, "No one invited you. Why are you here?" Linda and Helen grew up as two halves of the same whole. With only a few years between them, they seemed destined to never be separated. Since they were little, they were always seen together, sharing the same toys, the same games, the same dreams. If one cried, the other consoled. If one laughed, the other joined in. There were no secrets between them, as each confession was shared as if it belonged to both of them. They were more than sisters. They were best friends, confidants, accomplices in everything. But time has cruel ways of testing even the strongest bonds, and life doesn't always follow the plans made in childhood. It was in the late stages of their youth that this bond began to crack. Everything happened without planning, without intention, without warning. A name appeared between them, and without them noticing, it became an invisible barrier. Justin. He was not just an acquaintance or a fleeting attraction. He was the man both of them fell in love with. At first, they tried to ignore what they were feeling, thinking that this uncomfortable emotion was nothing more than a whim, something that would pass with time. But the feelings didn't disappear. On the contrary, they grew, creeping between them in a sly way. His presence, once casual, began to weigh heavily. What was once shared lightly, like all the other experiences they had together, transformed into something silently contested. Neither of them dared to speak openly about what was happening. Neither had the courage to admit they wanted more than friendship from Justin, but the truth was there, pulsing in every avoided glance, in every silence that had never existed before. The affection between the sisters began to wear thin, slowly and imperceptibly, like a fabric unraveling thread by thread. There were no arguments, no direct accusations, but something inside them was slowly being eaten away at each day. It was like a poison that accumulated little by little, contaminating what had once been unbreakable. In the end, there was no big clash. No direct confrontation, no decision made together. Justin chose. He chose Linda. And in that instant, without a single word spoken, something inside Helen shattered. She never said she hated her, never screamed in anger, never asked for explanations. But Linda knew. She knew from the empty look, from the absence of words, from the distance that didn't need to be verbalized. Helen was no longer the same, and Linda, no matter how much she wanted to, could never fix that. When the wedding came, officially sealing what had already been decided, the separation between the two sisters became final. Even without intention, even without desire, on that day, Linda lost Helen. The following months were marked by failed attempts at reconciliation. Linda didn't want to accept that she had lost her sister, so she tried everything. She sent messages that never received a reply, made calls that rang until they went to voicemail, wrote letters that were probably torn up without being read. She tried to get close, tried to talk, tried to make the relationship go back to what it had been. But Helen remained inaccessible. She didn't attack her, didn't confront her, but she also didn't offer a single shred of openness. Only after a long time, after tireless insistence, did Helen finally relent and agree to talk to her. They talked, made up, or at least that's what Linda believed, but it was a fragile truce, something superficial, something that was never completely real. What had once been closeness was now only tolerance, a cold relationship with no fights, but also no love. Both of them accepted this distance as the only possible way to maintain any connection. They were never the same again. The years passed, and life followed its course, though differently from what Linda had imagined. Her marriage to Justin was not like in the early months, when everything seemed perfect. The little differences between them, which had once been ignored, began to stand out. Linda tried to believe it was just a phase, that the love they had would overcome any difficulties. After all, she had sacrificed so much to be with him. But over time, she realized that the initial passion had transformed into something lukewarm, almost automatic. Affectionate gestures became rare, conversations grew shorter, and the sparkle in his eyes was no longer the same. Still, Linda insisted, the marriage wrapped them up like a silent trap. Dinner together became cold, the silences longer. When they talked, it was only about practical matters, bills, work, daily tasks. The kisses, once intense and passionate, became mere farewells. Still, she refused to see the obvious. Every prolonged absence of Justin was justified in her mind. Every lame excuse, every ignored message was rationalized with the hope that true love withstood time. Then one day the truth came without warning, brutal and devastating. Linda was at home preparing dinner when she heard the door open. The clock showed almost midnight. Justin entered with a heavy expression, throwing the keys on the table. She noticed something different about him. There was something in his eyes, in his posture, in the way he avoided looking at her. "You're late," Linda said, trying to hide the unease in her voice. "Yes," he replied, not going into further detail. She dried her hands on the dish towel and moved closer. "Is something wrong? You seem off." He sighed, rubbed his face, and then looked at her in a way that made her stomach turn. "We need to talk." His tone was too serious. Linda felt her heart race. "What's going on? You're scaring me." Justin hesitated. He looked at the floor for a few seconds before finally saying, "I'm seeing someone else." The words hit her like a thunderclap. For a moment, everything around her seemed to freeze. "What?" Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I didn't want it to happen like this, but it did. I fell in love with another woman. I can't keep lying to you and to myself." Linda felt her legs give way. She grabbed the counter to keep from falling. Her chest burned as though something had been ripped out of her. "You're telling me you cheated on me?" she asked, still trying to process. "Yes," he admitted without hesitation. A devastating silence filled the room. The air seemed heavy, suffocating. She wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to say something that would make him regret it, but all she could do was laugh in disbelief. "So, this is it? After everything? After—" Her voice faltered. She couldn't finish the sentence. "I didn't plan for this, Linda," Justin said, as if trying to justify himself. "But things between us haven't been right for a long time. You know that." She felt rage bubbling up inside her. "And instead of trying to fix things, you just cheated on me? Is that what you do when things get tough?" He lowered his head. "I didn't want to hurt you." Linda let out a bitter laugh. "But you did, and a lot." Silence returned to fill the space between them. She wanted to ask who the woman was, wanted to know how long this had been going on, but she knew the answers would only make her suffer even more. Eventually, Justin lifted his gaze and said, "I want a divorce." The words fell on her like a sentence. Linda felt a tightness in her chest, as if she were being suffocated. There was no more discussion. There was nothing left to say. In the following months, Linda lived through a personal hell. The nights were long and full of tears. Her pillow became a refuge for her silent crying. Every memory of Justin tormented her like a ghost. She tried to understand where she had gone wrong, what she could have done differently. But deep down, she knew the fault wasn't hers. The loneliness weighed more than she had imagined. Linda avoided going out, avoided talking to acquaintances, avoided anything that could remind her of the life she once had. The marriage that had once been her greatest dream was now just a painful chapter of the past. Time passed, and gradually the pain lost some of its intensity. She began to rebuild herself, piece by piece. She no longer thought of Justin with the same anguish, no longer relived every detail of the betrayal as if it were an open wound. Then, one afternoon, while having coffee alone, her phone rang. It was a distant aunt, someone she hadn't spoken to in ages. "Did you hear the news?" the voice on the other end asked. Linda furrowed her brow. "What news?" The response came as a surprise. "Helen is getting married." She went silent for a few seconds. "Helen," she repeated, as if needing to confirm she had heard correctly. "Yes, the wedding is next month." Linda felt her heart tighten. The news wasn't shocking in itself. After all, Helen had the right to rebuild her life. But something deeply unsettled her. She hadn't been invited. Looking back, Linda knew that her relationship with her sister would never be the same, but they hadn't fought recently. There were no more direct conflicts, just a distance that had become habitual. If there was no more open resentment, why hadn't she received an invitation? Maybe it had been an oversight. Maybe Helen just assumed Linda wouldn't be interested. But deep down, something told her it wasn't a mistake. The doubt consumed her for days. Deep down, she still wanted to believe there was room for her in her sister's life. And then, against all logic, against the weight of the past and the uncertainty of what she would find, she made her decision. She would go to the wedding. Time passed, and the day of the wedding arrived. Linda took a deep breath as she parked the car near the venue. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, as though holding it tightly could contain the storm inside her. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths, her mind wrestling with the decision of whether she should even be there. But it was too late to turn back. She needed to see Helen, needed to understand why she hadn't been invited. Maybe it was all just a mistake. Maybe there was still something to salvage between them. She stepped out of the car, adjusting the simple dress she had chosen. She didn't want to draw attention, just to be present. She walked across the stone pathway, watching as guests entered easily, greeted with smiles and warm hellos. Her heart clenched. Why wasn't she a part of that? When she reached the entrance, she faced a tall, burly security guard who looked at her indifferently. Before she could say anything, he extended his hand in a gesture to stop her. "Invitation, please," he said, without even trying to mask his impatience. Linda swallowed. I'm the bride's sister." The guard raised an eyebrow, eyeing her for a moment before shaking his head. "No invitation, no entry." She felt a lump in her throat. "This must be a mistake. I'm family," she tried to explain, keeping her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "Orders from the bride," came the immediate reply. Linda blinked a few times, stunned. "Orders from the bride?" she repeated, feeling the ground slip beneath her feet. The man crossed his arms, impassive. She was clear about who could and couldn't enter. "Your name's not on the list." Linda's heart raced. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. She felt her throat dry as she watched guests pass without any problem. Some threw curious glances, whispering among themselves. The heat of humiliation rose up her body. "Then please call Helen. I need to talk to her." The security guard hesitated for a moment, but eventually nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared inside the hall. Linda crossed her arms, trying to control the trembling in her hands. She felt exposed, as though she were standing on a stage, being watched by everyone. The cold night wind blew against her skin, but what really froze her was the fear of what was coming next. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps approaching. She lifted her gaze, and then she saw Helen. Her sister was stunning in her flawless white dress. Her hair was carefully pinned up, and the veil draped delicately over her shoulders. She was the picture of a radiant bride, but contrary to what Linda expected, there was no emotion on her face. No surprise, no joy, no discomfort, just coldness. "What are you doing here?" Helen asked, her voice as sharp as broken glass. Linda's chest tightened even more. I heard about the wedding and came. I thought it was a mistake not to receive an invitation." Her voice came out weaker than she wanted. Helen let out a dry laugh. "A mistake," she repeated, as if finding humor in the idea. "It wasn't a mistake, Linda. You simply weren't invited." The impact of those words hit Linda like a punch. She blinked, feeling a lump form in her throat. "But why? I thought we had moved past the past. I thought, after all this time, there would still be a place for me in your life." Helen tilted her head to the side, as though assessing her. "You really believed that, didn't you?" Her voice was loaded with sarcasm. Linda felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you trying to say?" she asked, fearing the answer. Her sister smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of triumph, that all of this was planned. Her voice was low, but each word cut deep. "Every conversation we had, every polite gesture, every moment I made it seem like everything was fine. It was all part of a game." Linda felt the air leave her lungs. "A game? What are you saying, Helen?" "I'm saying I waited. I waited for the right moment to make you feel what I felt." Her voice was thick with satisfaction. "You took something from me in the past, and now, finally, I've taken something from you." Linda's heart was pounding in her chest. "What?" Her mind refused to understand. Helen glanced over her shoulder and gestured with her hand. Then, from the crowd, a figure emerged. Linda felt the world spin when she saw him. It was Justin, her ex-husband, the man who destroyed her, the man who cheated on her, the man she sacrificed her relationship with her sister for. And now, he was here, dressed for the wedding, the groom. The shock stole her breath. She looked from Helen to Justin, waiting for some explanation, hoping it was all a mistake. But Justin simply looked away, unable to face her. The truth hit Linda like a brutal blow. "No," she murmured, her voice choking. "Yes, Linda, Justin and I. It was with me he's been all this time." Linda's head was spinning. "Is this why he left me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Justin finally spoke, his voice full of shame. "Linda, But he fell silent, with nothing left to say. Helen crossed her arms. "Now you understand, don't you? What it's like to lose to someone else. What it's like to be discarded." Rage began to boil within Linda. "You did all of this for revenge?" she asked, her eyes burning. Helen shrugged. "I did it because you deserved it. You destroyed something inside me years ago. Now I've repaid the favor." Linda felt the bitter taste of humiliation. "This is sick, Helen," her voice filled with pain. Her sister showed no remorse. "And you shouldn't be here. If you don't leave on your own, the security will take care of it." Linda looked at Justin one last time. He still couldn't look her in the eye. There was nothing left to say. She took a deep breath, feeling the last shred of hope shatter within her. What she was facing was the absolute truth. Everything she believed about Helen, about reconciliation, about the past, it had all been a lie. Linda left the wedding feeling empty. The weight of the humiliation still burned her skin, but more than that, there was a profound exhaustion inside her. For years, she had tried to hold on to what was left of her relationship with her sister, tried to believe that somehow, one day, everything would be okay. But there, faced with the cruel truth, she saw she was holding on to something that no longer existed. Helen was no longer her sister, at least not in the way she once had been. The following months were a slow healing process. Linda had to relearn how to live without carrying the weight of the past. The pain from Justin's betrayal and Helen's revenge didn't disappear immediately, but each day she found a little more strength. She stopped reliving the scene of the wedding in her mind, stopped trying to find a reason for what had happened. Some days, were harder than others. There were nights when she wondered if something could have been different. But then she remembered Helen's words, Justin's averted gaze, and she knew that as painful as it was better this way. She dedicated herself to rebuilding her life, focused on work, reconnected with friends she had let slip away, traveled to places she had always wanted to visit. For the first time, she realized she had never allowed herself to live for herself. She had always been trapped by someone, by her sister, by her marriage, by the expectations of a perfect life. But now, everything was different. She no longer expected anything from anyone. Linda didn't want apologies. She didn't want revenge. She only wanted peace. Then on a cold night, when she believed Helen was a distant past, she heard urgent knocks at the door. She stood still for a few seconds. It was frantic, desperate knocking, as though whoever was on the other side needed to see her immediately. Her chest tightened with a strange feeling. She walked to the door, hesitant, and opened it. Helen was there. The shock was immediate. She looked like a different person. Her face was swollen, her eyes red, her hands trembling. She cried uncontrollably, as if the world was falling apart around her. Linda felt nothing as she saw her, no compassion, no desire to hug her, just the memory of what her sister had done to her. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice firm, without a trace of emotion. Helen sobbed before she could answer. "He cheated on me, Linda." Linda stayed silent, just watching. Helen took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "I came home today and he was with someone else. In our bed." The confession didn't surprise her. Linda had known since the day she discovered the truth that this would happen. Helen wiped her face, the desperation overflowing. "I was such a fool. I thought it would be different with me, that he really loved me, but I was just another one. He never changed, never truly loved me. I threw everything away for him, Linda, everything. I hurt you, I hated you. I spent years feeding this revenge, and for what? To end up just like you, to be cheated on the same way." Linda crossed her arms. It was obvious this would happen. Helen blinked, surprised by her sister's coldness. If he was capable of cheating on one woman, he would certainly cheat on another. You thought you were special, but you never were. He just repeated what he's always done, and now you're feeling what I felt. Helen collapsed. She cried uncontrollably, shaking with pain. I know. You were right. You've always been right." Linda watched her for long seconds. She saw her sister broken, regretful, hurt, but she felt no pleasure in that, no sense of victory, just an immense emptiness. "Forgive me," Helen begged, her voice breaking. "Please, Linda, I was blind. I was cruel. But I regret it. I would give anything to go back, to never have done this to you." Linda stayed still. Helen continued, "I'm alone. I have no one. You were everything I had, and I threw it all away. I threw everything away." Linda sighed, looking away. "I needed you when everything fell apart for me, and you chose to destroy me even more." Helen tried to say something, but Linda raised her hand. "Go away." "No, Linda, please." But the door closed, and Linda never looked back. Time passed. Linda moved forward, stronger than ever. She learned to love herself, to put herself first. She never allowed herself to be manipulated again, never based her happiness on someone else's acceptance. She discovered that the peace she had always sought only existed within her, and she should never have depended on the love of a sister or a man to feel whole. Helen, for her part, found herself alone. Her revenge didn't bring her happiness, only loneliness. The betrayal destroyed her, and the weight of her own choices haunted her every day. Justin continued as he always had. He followed the same cycle of betrayals, lies, empty promises. He never changed, never cared. For him, it was just another repeated story. But for Linda, that was the end of one cycle and the beginning of a new life, a life where, for the first time, she was in control. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.